States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The prayer this morning will be offered by the good delegate from Frederick County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let us pray. Our tender caregiver, we lift up this most sacred time to love and cherish our sisters and brothers observing Ramadan. Help us empathize with others. We have spent many months with one another. Please continue your work in us to be better public servants to one another and to those we serve. Help us devote more time to our own health so that we may be more compassionate and caring towards our neighbors. Heal us. Inspire us to develop healthy habits like empathy, forgiveness, grace, and most importantly, gentleness that will stick with us beyond this session. Great Counselor, this is the day you have made. Let us make a difference. In your blessings we pray. Amen.
Amen. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. There being 124 members present, the House is now in session. Clerk will read a journal from the previous day.
Annapolis, Maryland, March 16, 2023.
Recognizing the Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the journal.
So ordered. Petitions, memorials, and other papers. House resolution, we recognizing the sponsor to introduce the group, and that would be the Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. It is my honor to recognize Maryland's 40-plus year partnership with Taiwan, the Republic of China, and our support of the bilateral trade agreement. Myself, Madam Speaker, and many others here in the General Assembly have traveled to Asia to deepen our understanding and learn firsthand how our partnership in the state of Maryland makes our economy stronger. Joining us today are members of the Taipei Economic Cultural Representative Office, Deputy Representative Minister Robin Chang, Director Daniel Wu, and Senior Officer Dennis Hong. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you so much for this genuine partnership in the state of Maryland.
Will the reading clerk please read the resolution in full?
Be it hereby known to all that the House of Delegates of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office in recognition of the partnership between Maryland and Taiwan and our shared common values for freedom, democracy, and human rights. Acknowledge our strong economic relations span of 4 decades. The entire membership extends best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution to be presented on this 28th day of March 2023. that first. Okay.
Message from the Senate, House Bill 200. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 200, Budget Bill, Fiscal Year 2024. Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate does not recede in the Senate amendments and agrees to a conference committee to confer the disagreeing votes of the two houses. The House has appointed Delegate B. Barnes chair, Delegate Chang, Delegate Smith, Delegate Grice, Delegate Corman. In addition, the House has appointed in advisory capacity Delegates Shetty, J. Lewis, and Bridges. The Senate appoints Senator Gazzoni chair, Senator Rosapep, Senator McCrae, Senator King, and Senator Quarterman. In addition, the Senate has appointed in advisory capacity Senators Elfreth, Jackson, and Zucker. Said bill is returned herewith.
Message from the Senate, House Bill 202. The clerk will read the bill. Please, go ahead.
House Bill 202, Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2023.
Clerk will read the message from the Senate.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate does not recede in the Senate amendments and agrees to a conference committee to confer the disagreeing votes of the two houses. The House has appointed Delegate B. Barnes chair, Delegate Chang, Delegate Grice, Delegate Forbes, and Delegate Shetty. In addition, the House has appointed in advisory capacity Delegate Smith, Bridges, and Corman. The Senate appoints Senator Gazzoni chair, Senator Rosapep, Senator Bailey, Senator Benson, and Senator Hedelman. In addition, the Senate has appointed in advisory capacity Senators Jennings, Saling, and Zucker. Said bill is returned herewith.
Message from the Senate, Senate bills introduced in the House. The clerk will read the bills and committee assignments.
Senate Bill 914, Senator Ellis, House Rules. Senate Bill 940, Senator Muse, House Rules. Senate Bill 962, Anne Arundel County Senators, House Rules. Senate Bill 965, Senator Benson, House Rules. Order to Sylvia Secret, Chief Clerk.
Report of the Committee on Health and Government Operations, report number 17. The clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 3988, Trust Fund, funding, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
Senate Bill 14, Health Occupations, Clinical and Graduate Alcohol and Drug Counselors, licensure, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
Senate Bill 35, Open Meetings Act, State Ethics Commission, Maryland State Agency Transparency Act of 2023, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
Senate Bill 101, Maryland Medical Assistance Program, Collaborative Care Model Services, Implementation and Reimbursement Expansion, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 112, State Finance and Procurement Grants Prompt Payment Requirement, favorable.
Question before the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 168, Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council, establishment, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill Senate Bill 202, Prescription Drug Affordability Board, upper payment limits, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 215, Massage Therapy, Discipline, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 217, Transit Commuter Bus Service Procurement, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 231, Maryland Medical Assistance Program, Autism Waiver, Military Families, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 234, Health Services Cost Review Commission, Hospital Rates, All-Payer Model Contract, favorable.
These are Senate bills. Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 256, Environment Firefighting Training Oriented Strand Board Prohibition, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 332, Maryland African American Museum Corporation Board of Directors, membership, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 349, State Board of Examiners of Psychologists, License and Registration Issuance and Renewals, Electronic Means, favorable.
Question for the House is adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 375, State Board of Physicians, Inactive and Emeritus Status, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 386, Certified Local Farm and Fish Program Establishment, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 474, Managed Care Organizations, Retroactive Denial of Reimbursement, Information in Written Statement, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 478, Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Reporting and Sunset Extension, favorable.
Question before the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 498, Rural Health Collaborative Pilot Repeal and Midshore Health Improvement Coalition Funding, favorable.
Question for the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 678, Health Insurance Reimbursement for Services Rendered by a Pharmacist, favorable.
Question before the House is the adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered passed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Health and Government Operations, report number 18. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 131, Mandated Reports, Revisions, Favorable Amendments, Amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 makes a technical correction, alters reporting dates for reports by the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, the Department of the Environment, the Bay Restoration Fund Advisory Committee, and the Office of Recycling, and moves an ongoing reporting requirement for the Department of the Environment from uncoded language into the code. Move the amendments, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 251, State Government Commission on LGBTQIA plus Affairs alterations. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 expands diversity categories sought to be reflected in the membership of the Commission. Please move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment has been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 334, State Procurement Minority Business Enterprise Program Extension and Reports. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 adds the Attorney General to the Procurement Improvement Council and authorizes the Attorney General to send a designee to the council meeting if the Attorney General is unable to attend. Move the amendments, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 451, Procurement Improvement Council Membership and Duties. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 adds the Attorney General to the Procurement Improvement Council and authorizes the Attorney General to send a designee to the council meetings if the Attorney General is unable to attend. Move the amendments, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 842, Maryland Holocaust Remembrance Day. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
First Amendment alters the preamble, which conforms it to the House cross file, which passed 135 to 0. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered past the third reading. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? The clerk will take the call. There being 135 members present, the House is still in session. Calendar of third reading, House Bills number 87. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 984, Public Employee Relations Act.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 100 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 984, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1274, Employees Retirement and Pension Systems Reemployment Earnings Limitation COVID-19 Exemption.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1274, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Calendar of third reading, House Bills number 86. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 755, Estates and Trust Registered Domestic Partnerships.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 131 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 755, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1280, Department of State Police Professional Occupations Application Process.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1280, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1300, Family Law, Child Care, Criminal Background Investigations.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1300, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Message from the Chief Executive, Supplemental Budget Number 2. The clerk will read the supplemental budget and the committee assignment.
March 27, 2023. Dear Madam Speaker, pursuant to the authority conferred on me by Article 3, Section 52, Subsection 5 of the Constitution of Maryland, and in accordance with the consent of the House of Delegates duly granted, I hereby submit Supplemental Budget Number 2 to House Bill 200, Senate Bill 181, in the form of an amendment to the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. Supplemental Budget Number 2 affects the previously estimated funds available for budget operations as shown in the following summary statement. Sincerely, Wes Moore, Governor, referred to appropriations.
Special Order Calendar Number 40. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 772, Human Relations, Civil Rights Enforcement, Powers of the Attorney General. Favor report is amended and adopted.
Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we'd indicated last night, we have ordered and requested 2 amendments. The amendment that I was prepared to offer is not quite back yet from the Amendments Office. It's probably a little bit more technical. There is an amendment from another member that would be, I think, in order to offer today on the bill. And if the Speaker would indulge me, I would yield to the gentleman from St. Mary's County for the purpose of offering that amendment.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment number 553221/1.
Amendment number 1.
So be considered reading of that amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Friends, this bill reminds me of the bill that we had on the floor last week that we had very brief debate about HB 1075, the Office of Domestic Terrorism. And as a Republican, I'm always apprehensive on some of these bills that really expand government and authorize different agencies to be, I guess, more active. Because I know that nobody infringes on civil rights or individuals or businesses quite like the government has the ability to do that. This bill authorizes the Attorney General's office to sue businesses, people that infringe on civil rights, which at first blush is a good thing. We normally leave that up to the feds. The bill also talks about working with the State of Maryland Civil Rights Commission. Now, here's the thing. We had a briefing on this earlier in the year. I'm looking at it right now. They printed up this nice book. And it talked about discrimination reports by county. The first thing that jumps out at this book is, the areas where you think discrimination would be occurring. In the red area, it's almost non-existent. But per this book, per the Civil Rights Commission's book they put out, it's 623 cases in year 2021, which I didn't really think was that high considering we have 6.3 million people in the state of Maryland. But I remember during the testimony asking them, I'm like, well, how many of these cases are fraudulent? And the gentleman that runs the commission was very nice, and he said about 50%. 50% of the cases were fraudulent. So this bill empowers the Attorney General. And I said it was ripe for abuse. So let's think about what we've done with the Attorney General's office the last 5 years. We've empowered it from the Maryland General Assembly and really unhandcuffed them. And let's see, if you ask yourself a question, have they behaved politically? And the answer is overwhelmingly yes. Over the last 3-4 years, especially during the Trump administration, they had dozens upon dozens of lawsuits over and over again that were completely politically driven and just really not behaving appropriately, especially with the $1 million that we gave them to act politically. So what this amendment does for this bill is very simple. If the Attorney General brings a case and the defendant is found not guilty, well, it makes the state of Maryland responsible for the defendant's attorney's fees. And if you look at it, it says, I'm going to read you a amendment, in any civil action brought under this part, the court may award the prevailing defendant reasonable attorney fees. I think that's more than fair. It's completely reasonable and completely immoral. And I move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd ask the body to resist the amendment. They can already get fees back if the case is brought by the state, in this case under the bill, in bad faith. That's our law. That's been our law. It's right that is our law and that's the standard. The Attorney General's office has limited resources. It's going to have limited resources to bring these kinds of suits in the first place, so they're going to have to pick the ones that they believe are the ones that are the biggest and most substantial ones. They're not going to want to run afoul of having to pay the attorney fees, and that's why there is that standard that says if they bring something in bad faith, then the attorney fees aren't covered. So with that, Madam Speaker, I'd ask the body to resist the amendment.
The minority.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And what my friend, the committee chair, said is absolutely true. There is a provision, I think it's Maryland Rule 1341, that suggests that if you maintain a civil action in bad faith, you can be subject to sanctions by the court. And what I would suggest to you is that it is a commonly well-known fact among everyone who litigates in the state of Maryland that almost never happens. Very, very seldom ever happens. And it would be extraordinarily unlikely for it to happen in an Attorney General action, because the court would determine that the Attorney General had this process to review and investigate, and if they had any belief whatsoever, even if it turned out that they were wrong, that their action was thus not maintained in bad faith, because they have these sort of processes and procedures to eliminate someone from just rushing. The Attorney General isn't a normal litigant. They don't just rush to the courtroom and file the suit. But the Attorney General's office, like all of us, is sometimes wrong. They sometimes get it wrong. Sometimes witnesses lie. Sometimes witnesses or complainants overstate things. Sometimes political zeal or professional zeal overtakes sound judgment and they get it wrong. And I think what the gentleman's amendment would suggest is this. When you're the state of Maryland, the $63 billion Leviathan, the largest law firm in the state of Maryland by a wide margin is the Attorney General's office, by a wide margin. And when you come after Joe's Body Shop or Sally's local hotel or Pete and Jamie's hairdressing salon, and when you come after them and they don't have a law firm and they're just trying to hire people and they can afford $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and you allege something as severe, as significant, as disqualifying in modern life in many ways as a civil rights violation is today, it is aberrant, it is ridiculous, it is absurd and shameful to conduct yourself in a racially discriminatory way. No one should challenge that. It's terrible. There's no explanation, there's no justification for it. But when that individual or that small business is charged, essentially, is alleged to have committed these types of actions, and they fight for their business, they fight for their reputation, they say, I did not do this, I would not do this, this is not how it happened, this was not my intent, this is not what occurred. They will have two options probably against the Attorney General's office. They will probably bankrupt themselves in order to defend their business and their reputation. And so their business will be shuttered. If they don't have the availability of this amendment to say, if you're wrong, Attorney General's office, if a fact finder concludes I didn't do it, I'm not a civil rights violator, I'm not a racist, I'm not discriminatory against those with disabilities, I would not do that, I did not do that, and they win, it's a Pyrrhic victory if by winning their business, their livelihood is shut down because of their attorney's fees in fighting the Leviathan of the Attorney General's office. And I think all the gentleman's amendment tries to do is provide an opportunity for those small businesses and the lawyers who choose to represent them to say, if we are right and if we are successful, there is recourse for you so that you will not be bankrupted. It won't happen very often, but it may happen. And I think that's why the amendment is well considered, and I hope the chamber considers it that way. Thank you.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If you read this bill, it sets up a specialty fund. So giving these monies back for when there's a fraudulent lawsuit, that the people are found innocent, the government is not drowning you in legal fees, I mean, it's only right. This is the moral argument to be made on this bill, on this amendment. It is the right thing to do. I move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a question for the amendment maker, because I don't know the answer. Could you get insurance for something like this? Because I don't think you could, but I don't know. And I mean, if you're a small business, I mean, and you don't have any ability to have something when the biggest law firm in the state of Maryland comes after you, to be able to fight back or at least to get legal counsel. So, you know, that is paid for by your insurance company. So I just kind of wanted to ask that question.
To answer your question honestly, I have no idea what insurance products are out there. I don't think there's any to cover for civil rights infractions. And look, there's probably none out there because this is a brand new law that's being passed. But to me, right, I just don't see that actually happening where someone's actually going to get through the trouble of purchasing insurance. This is, yeah, I don't think that'll be happening.
Chairman of the committee.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Again, I'd ask the body to resist the amendment. Again, we have a standard already in place that says that if the Attorney General's office was to bring something in bad faith, then there is an action available so that people can get those attorneys' fees back. We don't want to stop the Attorney Generals from bringing cases in good faith. That's what we want the Attorney General to do. We want them to do their due diligence, and we know, again, because of relatively limited resources, they're only going to be able to bring a certain number of these cases. they're going to be in the most serious cases, and they are going to want to make sure, because of that, that they're not cases that are fraudulently brought. And for that reason, we don't need this amendment. And thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think a key point that the minority leader made was that in practice, what the floor leader was saying hardly ever happens. So I do have a question for the floor leader. So in your experience, is what he was saying true or not true?
Committee Chair.
In my experience, I don't deal with civil cases, I deal with criminal ones. So, but from what I understand, again, in the bill, we don't have this generally in our entire civil system. We don't have this as a rule. This is basically the English common law rule is what the delegate from St. Mary's is bringing forward. We are under the American rule where we don't allow people to seek those fees unless, again, the case is brought in bad faith.
I appreciate the answer. So I guess the answer probably is that you agree with, and it sounds like, that in practice this hardly ever happens. So it's critically important that this body actually give the opportunity for folks who were charged unfairly with a civil crime to being reimbursed for their attorney's fees. It just seems like the right thing to do, and I hope that this body will actually do that, because obviously what's written in law and what's actually in practice are two different things. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My understanding is that what's currently in law is the bad faith standard, and it's almost impossible to prove, or hasn't been proven recently. So what this amendment does is try to put it on a level playing field. There should be some checks and balances. If you're going to come after a business or an individual with the full weight of the Maryland government behind you, which is what the Attorney General's office is, look, there has to be some consequences for when they make a mistake or when they bring a fraudulent case where the person is not guilty. I mean, that's only right. And I would say that if you don't believe this is happening, or if you don't believe that the Attorney General's office, at least the last one, was politically motivated, look at the past results. Just with the last administration alone, there was dozens of lawsuits. And I'm not aware of a single one that was actually fulfilled to a point there was conviction. So we're drowning people in legal fees. This is only the right moral thing to do. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do just want to correct the record a little bit on the Defense of Maryland Act we passed a few years ago to empower the Attorney General to bring those suits to the federal government. Those weren't criminal suits. They weren't even civil suits in the sense of what we're describing here, so there wouldn't be quote-unquote convictions, but there were many successful efforts to stop illegal rules the court found illegal, being promulgated by the federal government. That's how our system works. Right now, there are many attorneys general in other states bringing suits against the current federal government, just as there was two presidencies ago, to make sure that the rules that this administration is promulgating also comply with our laws and Constitution. So the Defense of Maryland Act was quite successful despite the claims of the gentleman, and I would join the committee chair in urging the body to resist this unnecessary and ill-advised amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Clerk, call the roll. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The amendment that I'd mentioned has just arrived. I've had a quick opportunity to share it with the committee leadership. And so I would have an amendment at the desk. It is 723520/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So we just had a discussion about potentially how this new power granted to the Attorney General's office could severely affect individuals who believe that they are innocent and in fact would be proven to be innocent or conceded to be innocent in the context of this type of civil litigation claims, and how the attorney's fees could bankrupt them. I'm an attorney, and I will tell you this. A lot of our society is just getting warped in certain ways. A lot of our economic decisions, a lot of our ability for people to become entrepreneurs and small businesses and maintain the mom and pop stores that we all say that we want. We don't want everything to be Amazon. We don't want everything to be Walmart. A lot of that is getting warped, unfortunately, by my profession, by the incredible high costs of legal services and litigation. It is an explosion. I tell people frequently that, you know, unless you're really have been saving for a rainy day, even if you're upper middle class, lower end wealthy folks, successful small and mid-sized businesses, you should not be getting heavily involved in litigation. It is not an area for those who do not have the financial resources to do it. Is what this amendment does. We're obviously going to proceed with a bill that says the Attorney General's office has the ability to proceed with these civil rights enforcement actions, which is fine. If people find evidence of actual civil rights violations of significance, I think that it's fine and worthy to allow the Attorney General's office to do something about it. But what the bill also would do is allow people to proceed on essentially dual tracks. One of the damages that the Attorney General's office could receive or could seek is economic damages for the actual aggrieved individual. And so at the same time that the Attorney General's office is seeking these type of financial damages and penalties, a portion of which may accrue to the benefit of the allegedly harmed individual or individuals, those individual or individuals can also be maintaining their own private lawsuit. That, frankly, is a lot of how these civil rights violations and alleged civil rights violations are currently litigated. They're litigated through private attorneys. And the private attorneys have the potentiality to receive attorney's fees, particularly in federal court under something called Section 1983. Those of you who are familiar, as I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with the terrible tragedy of the Freddie Gray case, terrible tragedy of a young man's death, regardless of the circumstances, will likely remember that the city of Baltimore agreed to pay a very significant settlement, way outside of the Local Tort Claims Act, which bars multi-million-dollar judgments and penalties and suits against virtually every other city and county, well, every place, including the city of Baltimore. They agreed to pay, I believe, and please don't hold me to this if I'm getting it wrong, I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 million, which is well above the Local Tort Claims Act that each of us vote for and we voted for here over the years, because Mr. Gray's family's private attorney brought what's called a Section 1983 action for a civil rights violation in federal court. And there is an open question of law as to whether or not a civil rights violation is capped by the Local Tort Claims Act. And the city of Baltimore made a decision that rather than argue that legal point, they were simply going to make a very significant settlement of that civil rights claim. Why I remind you of that is to suggest, and what the amendment would do is to bar this type of dual track litigation, where an individual or a business gets sued for a civil rights violation by a private attorney that is seeking damages, and at the same time, the Attorney General's office pursues an action. I can tell you, I've never worked in the Attorney General's office, but I have litigated against them, and I can tell you that for all but the most significant of corporations or the most financially stable of individuals, it's a death sentence from an economic standpoint and a legal standpoint. It's hard to win, and it's impossible to keep up with. It's impossible. The Attorney General's office will bury you under paper. They will bury you under individuals. I know that my friend, the committee chair, said they have limited resources, but I don't know. I mean, there might be limited resources if you're litigating against the largest law firm in the state, but if you're litigating against most law firms and most businesses and most individuals, they just absolutely bury you with their size and the ability to do this. And so what the amendment does simply is to say you have to, we would call it your election of remedies. If the Attorney General's office initiates an action, then that's fine. And they're there not only for the individuals who are aggrieved, but to represent all of us, to seek injunctive relief, to make a point that we will not tolerate these types of civil rights violations or abuses, and they can do that and they can proceed. But you can't go get a private lawyer at the same time and say, I'm going to piggyback on the Attorney General's case, and because they're going to just hammer and hammer and hammer you, here's how I can get them off of your back. why don't you just settle with me? Why don't you just give me X amount of dollars, my private attorney will contact you, just pay me off, pay us the money, and then we'll tell the Attorney General's office, yeah, we don't want to proceed with that case anymore. That type of situation occurs far more than what you might think, and it is very, very difficult. You know, I tell people all the time, I don't know why anyone would start a small business. I don't know why. Between the taxes, the regulations, the lawyers, the HR departments, the law, I have no idea. Like if you have, you know, people at home that are constituents that say, my dream is to start a flower shop. My dream is to start a business making something and grow it. I'd look right at them and be like, you're crazy. You know, your dream should be going to be the assistant vice president for human relations at Amazon. It's much more stable, much less stress. You know, you don't have to worry about these things. That's what the amendment does, is that it prevents the double dipping of the apple, and it makes people choose, and the Attorney General's office choose. If this is an action best suited for private litigation and the private resolution of the dispute, so be it. And if it's an action best suited for the state of Maryland to invest itself and its resources in pursuing remedies, so be it. But you can't do both. I think it's fair, and I think it's reasonable, and I hope that it's considered as such. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd ask the body to resist this amendment as well. In the bill already, the Attorney General can intervene in cases where the private suit's already been brought. So the AG can basically step in and say, okay, we're going to take over this case. And if you're a private attorney handling one of those cases, you're not going to want to have a separate case at that point, because the Attorney General and what resources they do have is going to be dealing with the case as opposed to litigating the case. Their resources are going to go into that, and they will be able to get to a resolution of the matter one way or the other. If a party recovers from what the Attorney General works out, well, we have, and you know, I'm now in a PTSD moment from trying to remember civil procedure, it's estoppel. You're stopped from being able to claim again. So there's not really an incentive for a private lawyer to come back in and do this again. For all of these reasons, I don't believe that the amendment is necessary, and I'd ask the body to resist.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just in closing, two things that I think that remark from my friend indicates. Number one, why not just do the amendment then? If it's going to happen anyway, if the Attorney General got involved, why would a private suit continue to go forward? It would all just be merged together. Well, if that's the case, then why don't we make that clear? I say that a lot up here. If we all agree that that's the way it's going to happen and that makes sense, then let's just make it clear in the law. We're a lawmaking body. But the second thing I think that portends is the problem that I spoke to of the financial incentives for my profession. And the financial incentive for my profession is if someone hires you to begin a private civil action to sue for a civil rights violation, it's highly unlikely they're paying you at a billable hour rate. Maybe in some circumstances, but more often than not, they're seeking to get either a contingency fee or a fee award under a civil rights statute that would allow that fee shifting. And so if the Attorney General's office comes in and says, it's all my case now, it's all our case, you don't worry about it, private sector lawyer, that might work for the benefit of the aggrieved individual, but you know who it won't work for? The mortgage payment of the private sector lawyer who's like, whoa, I worked on this case, where do I get my fees? And so that becomes part of the issue. If that's what we think is going to happen under the bill, that the Attorney General's office will take over these private actions and will bring them on the behalf of the 6.2 million residents of Maryland, then let's make that clear and eliminate any confusion and remove any financial incentive to double dip against someone who's faced with these circumstances. With that subject to further debate, Madam Speaker, I'd move the amendment.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will call the roll. There being 98 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered, printed for third reading.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Vote change, please, on amendment number 1, Bill 772 to nay.
Okay. That ends the work at the desk. Committee announcements, appropriations,
Appropriations full committee will not meet today.
judiciary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House Judiciary Committee will have bill hearings starting at 1 o'clock. Subcommittee chairs meeting immediately after bill hearings.
Environment and Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Environment and Transportation Committee will continue public hearings at 1 p.m. Following that, we will have a brief voting session.
Ways and Means.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Ways and Means Committee will continue public bill hearings at 1 p.m. and immediately following that, subcommittee chairs meeting. Thank you.
Economic Matters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Economic Matters Committee will continue its bill hearings today at 1 p.m. Please be on time. Thank you.
Health and Government Operations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Health and Government Operations Committee will meet at 1 p.m., followed by a voting session. Thank you.
Rules.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Rules Committee will have a very brief meeting in the old executive chamber immediately following this session. Thank you.
Old Executive Chamber. You mean the old House chambers?
I'm sorry. The old House chamber.
Okay.
My
wanted to
mistake.
make sure. No, that's no problem. Any other subcommittees? Utilities.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Public Utilities will meet after bill hearings today in ECM on Zoom. Thank you.
Public Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Public Health and Minority Health Disparities Subcommittee will meet at 11 o'clock on Zoom.
Insurance and Pharmaceuticals.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Insurance and Pharmaceutical Subcommittee will meet at 11:15 on Zoom. Thank you.
Is anybody else getting up? Any delegation announcements? Okay. Any caucus announcements? Any personal or guest announcements?
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Prince George's.
Thank you. Again, colleagues, I am reminding you to please check your emails because hopefully you have received the email about the Speaker Society reception that will be held on Tuesday, April the 4th. It will be held in the Rotunda area of the House Office Building from 5 until 7 p.m. If you plan to attend, please RSVP immediately. That information should be in your email. You may also leave your payments today with Ms. Joyce Amos, who sits right outside of our chamber here. And please make sure that your payments have been received by Thursday, March the 30th. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I ask for your support in welcoming a very important constituent from District 30A. He was the director of our Anne Arundel County Boys and Girls Club for 25 years, and now he is the founder of the Annapolis and Anne Arundel County Scholarship Trust, Mr. Reginald Brody, in the gallery joining us today.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce my intern, Jackson Nix. He's sitting above the Speaker. He's a student of St. Mary's College, major in political science. Thank you.
I don't see anybody else getting up. Quorum call before adjournment.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? The clerk will take the call. There being 135 members present, and the House is still in session, recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the House stands adjourned until Wednesday, March 29th at 10 a.m., Legislative Day, March 18th.